Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again in this YouTube astrological segment. I'm going to be talking about transit Chiron, square, opposition, or inconjunct one's natal south node. Now, when we're talking about transits that involve Chiron, that can be about physical and emotional wounds and suffering, depleted self-esteem, self-worth, and also helping and healing others. Now, when transit Chiron is basically making an adverse aspect to one's natal south node, well, I'm going to elaborate on that. When I say basically adverse aspect, okay, now Chiron, squares and oppositions in astrology. Those aspects, of course, are adverse and negative. Now, the inconjunct is a neutral aspect, but neutral aspects can have good and bad qualities, and coupled with the fact that an inconjunct can often require an adjustment or a transition, and that in turn can cause some exasperation and tension. So basically, collectively, I do see this as an adverse transit. Now, anyway, when transit Chiron basically makes an adverse aspect to one's natal south node, it may manifest in physical and emotional wounds and suffering, depleted self-worth and self-esteem, and also helping and healing others that may conflict. It could be with what you're trying to leave behind and get away from. It could be, it could actually be where it may be more difficult in trying to get away, so to speak, from a physical or emotional wound or suffering. For example, if you have the transit Chiron, in Pisces in the 11th house, it could be some betrayal or deception or duplicity connected with a friend or an acquaintance. It may be something too where you may, in some, cases, you could look at this like, you have the transit Chiron, which is about your depleted self-worth and self-esteem. Those issues can be harder to leave behind and get away from as well. And it might be a time to, the South Node is also the past. And it could be people that were prominent in your past, whether it may have been from your early childhood. It could be someone from your early education, perhaps maybe even a past lover. And these things, might be these things, people from the past, things in your past. It might be a memory that's haunting you. And it may be something where it might be causing more greater emotional suffering at this time. And also, too, the South Node could be energy that could affect us to one's detriment. And it might be a time where you might be facing greater repercussions as a result of it. It could be more, emotional suffering. The thing is, like, say if you have the natal South Node, in Aquarius, it might be, you might be expressing very rebellious or, non-conforming or idiosyncratic behavior. And it might be something where it might be causing more suffering at this time, more so than usual. Maybe there's greater consequences as a result of it, such as losing a place in employment, as an example, or you might be repelling, or friends might be rebuffed by this behavior, as an example, and it might be leaving you more in a state that might not be emotionally well at this time. And another thing too is that this transit as well, keep in mind, the South Node can also be about what you're naturally proficient in. And it might be a time too where when you have this transit, it could be where you're dealing with some physical related issue or trauma that might be challenging you doing the things you're naturally proficient in. If you have let's say that the transit, Chiron, is in Gemini, it could be some physical related matter connected to the arms, the hands, the nerves, or it could even be something with the lungs that might be causing some issues where you really don't even you don't even feel like what you want to do in terms of your comfort zone, where you feel or things that you can do, you might naturally flourish in. Actually, if you have, like, say, the South Node, was in Taurus or Libra, it could be an artistic endeavor. that you may really actually, maybe you actually excel in, or if let's say if you have the natal south node in Gemini, it could be doing something that requires manual dexterity, such as auto refrigeration mechanics, is something that requires the strong use of the hands and certain dexterity, you could say. And the thing about this transit too is, now the thing is that the south node is also connected with overdeveloped and redundant qualities. And the thing is, I mean, let's say you have the south node in Aries. It might be, it could be very, you say very pushy, aggressive qualities, constantly wanting, to be first, and doing things, with little hesitation or procrastination, but to a point where it's really, redundant, doing something really wanting to do things in too much of a hurry, wanting to get up, so early, as an example, where it's almost to a point where, it's ridiculous, wanting just doing things where you can be, where it's just like to a point where it's overboard, where it's excessive. I mean, if the south node is in Virgo, say, it could be, like hypochondriac or germophobic qualities, where, I mean, I don't know if those terms are used anymore to describe those issues, where somebody's just, nearly, or say maybe fanatical about germs. Or if you have, to a point, let's say, you have another example, could be, I mean, with South Node in Virgo, it could be very, like, being precise, or to a point where it really gets, where it might almost be ludicrous, or it could simply be, trying, being over, analytical, analyzing things almost to death, like, like if you're doing astrology, like trying to see the Dwad within the Dwad, as an example. It could, things of that nature, and it might be causing more, such as more emotional suffering at this point, because it might be, again, like repelling friends or people that could have potentially been friends. I had somebody say to me one time, I have a South Node in Virgo on my natal chart, and somebody said to me one time that I'm too precise. And you usually don't hear, criticism over somebody being too precise, but maybe the South Node in Virgo can be a little bit, say, too precise. Trying to be like Mr. Exactitude and be somewhere like very, being punctual, like constantly, because I guess maybe in his mind, maybe it made him feel insecure because he couldn't be there on time when he needed to be. So this is anyway, another thing is that the South Node is also, it also correlates with our comfort zone, where it could be complacent and self-satisfied. It's a natural, I mean, it reflects a natural built-in abilities. And the thing about it is, if you're trying to, go after, you could say your North Node placement, trying to emphasize or accentuate that energy, it may be harder because what it is you could be dealing, again, going back to physical discomfort, physical wounds and suffering. It might be harder for you to actually extricate yourself from that comfort zone at the time of this transit. It can be, something too, where you might feel that helping and healing others and dealing, doing things for others at this time and helping them in their, whether dilemma or predicament they're dealing with, that might be interfering with where you feel comfortable, in your life at this time. That's another way this transit, could pan out. Remember, Chiron also can reflect the deepest wound that one has. And it can be something where if somebody from your past is coming into view, they might not exactly, be there to support you, to give you that emotional support you may need to be dealing with. They might be, for example, just being, being about themselves. They'd be worried about their own, egocentric or self-centered interests, as an example. Hold on a moment, people. Sorry about that, I'm back. Anyway, now another way this transit may manifest, it could be difficult to help and heal others due to something that may be affecting you to your detriment, which is the South Node. The helping healing others, of course, is Chiron. Now, let's say, for example, if the natal South Node is in Gemini in the third house, it could be dealing with a very mischievous or devious, which would be Gemini, a neighbor, which is the third house. Another thing, too, is that physical and emotional wounds and suffering may cause more difficulty in trying to do things that you feel comfortable in, that you might feel you're naturally proficient in, which is the South Node. And the physical and emotional ones, of course, is Chiron. Now, let's say, for example, if the natal South Node is in Capricorn in the 12th house, it could be trying to get really doing things maybe with structure, literally structure with die cast, could be models, which is Capricorn, in solitude and seclusion, which is the 12th house. Now, depleted self-worth and self-esteem, how you feel about yourself, which is Chiron, may adversely affect matters with somebody that may have been prominent in your past, which is the South Node. Now, let's say, for example, if the natal South Node is in Virgo in the 5th house, it could be somebody maybe that was prominent in your intellectual and analytical, which is Virgo, in the enjoyment, which is the 5th house. It could have been somebody that liked to play intellectual games that required analysis, like chess or haiku, as some examples. Now, also, too, the pain that runs deepest, which is Chiron, may be harder to get away from at this time. Now, let's say if the transit Chiron is in Aries in the 12th house, it could be maybe lack of initiative and enterprise, which is Aries, which could be Chiron and Aries. Could be the self-undoing or tied to secret sorrows, which is the 12th house. There could be a feeling of simple unworthiness, and which could be Chiron and Aries. And again, the 12th house is secret sorrows. And the thing is, it may be harder to get away from because you have making an basically adverse aspect to the natal South Node. But anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, people, Edwin Learnard saying stay well.